So I want to talk today about a research project that my colleague Stephen Katz and I are engaged in. And I want to share with you today some of our thoughts so far on digital technologies that quantify age and age-related function, and particularly in the ways in which they track and record individual health measures, and then communicate data collected from that into creating new standards for measuring individuals against goals and against norms. And a little bit more broadly, how they form part of what is called a socio-technical imaginary of what aging futures could look like. Did we? Oh, we've gone way past slide 3 here. Okay, slide 2. So this is the capitalist connection. Let's be, honest about it. There's this techno-optimism that, technologies aimed at managing aging populations represent the next big thing for investors. Some of the claims, it's the next $1 billion opportunity. It's a 300 billion senior care industry. And in a presentation to the International Society for Gerontechnology in May of this year, AgeWell, which is a Canadian industry university partnership that works on aging and technology, noted that significant global investment is now aligned with policy initiatives, both federal and international priorities, around this idea of active and healthy aging. It's considered that this is a common problem for the Western world, and it's more and more data-driven. It's more and more driven by information technologies. And the assumption here is that this can deliver significant cost savings to offset what's often erroneously, I think, portrayed in the media as this, tsunami of, of costs that are going to be incurred by aging populations. That are going to, swamp the younger generation. Susan Picard just published a wonderful paper on that sort of intergenerational war metaphor around aging populations that, if you're interested in that, you can look at. So it's an idea that this is going to give us significant cost savings, while at the same time offering huge opportunities for capital investment. So this is what they call the silver. We're going backwards. Okay. Presentations on technology are always really interesting with technology. Why is this not going forward? There we are. This is what they call the silver economy. And it's a wide-ranging vision of opportunities for investment that include everything from smart homes to personal fitness tracking to interactive devices to e-health platforms and so on. And again, this is from a vision produced by Canada's AgeWell network. I want to approach this by sketching, first of all, some of the kind of concepts that I've been finding helpful for identifying the sociological questions as opposed to the technical and economic investment questions here, and then look at a couple of specific technologies. So the first one that I want to outline is this idea that there is a social quantification sector. And this is a term from digital sociology, specifically from Nick Couldry and Ulysses Mayes. And these are enterprises that, as they state here, ensure the regular and seemingly natural conversion of daily life into a stream of data that can be appropriated for value. Okay, so when you have your smartphone in your pocket, it is recording things about you. It's telling me how active you are, where you've been, and this is all being transferred into things that are valuable. Your Fitbit data is being sold to something like 43 different companies that find ways to capitalize on that information. So the result, as they say, is this a new social order based on continuous tracking and offering unprecedented new opportunities for social discrimination and behavioral influence. And this is across a range of devices. So every time you go on Facebook, every time you search for a toaster on Amazon, you're going to see ads for toasters popping up, everywhere across. Now, as Stephen Katz, my collaborator, and I argue, this stream of data that's being produced has the potential to shape new dividing practices. And we argue that these are new ways of distinguishing between young, old, fit, frail, independent, dependent, and so on. Now, drawing on David Beer's work on in his recent book, Metric Power, I want to especially stress the relationships that are created here between what he calls measurement, circulation, and possibility. So measurement is required to differentiate, right, to make distinctions. And these measurements then circulate through commercial and policy and scientific and professional registers. And these in turn shape possibilities for how we treat people, for how we sort them, for how we treat them, for how we reward them, or how we don't reward them. And I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. And the final concept I want to draw on is this idea of socio-technical imaginaries that comes out of science and technology studies. And in their work, Jasanoff and Kim define these as collectively imagined forms of social life and social order. And these get reflected in the design and enactment of various technological projects. And these create narratives, these ideas, these imaginations of how we can incorporate technologies into our futures, create narratives, they create stories, they create possibilities, because they're quite normative, they prescribe things. So as described by Jasanoff and Kim, they offer a way to map the visions that different publics, whether these be governments or whether these be scientists or the visions they have of what the common good is and what our futures might be. This is very closely aligned with the idea of the co-constitution of technology and aging that you're going to hear more about this afternoon from Alex Payne and Louis Nevin a little bit later, because they kind of frame the ways we see these things developing together. Now, I think that this is a concept that's helpful in helping us grasp how technological developments are implicated in collective visions of aging. And by that I mean it's a really sociological problem. So we might now probe the visions of the role of technology in aging, expected benefits, expected risks, the visions of regulation, the visions of how to include aging individuals in these discussions, their families, their caregivers, in design, in assessment, in government, in all these things. So I want to ask some very sociological questions about technology in the sense of asking, how do we frame our ideas of what a good aging future is? Well, the bulk of our research to date has focused on identifying these socio-technical imaginaries of aging at a rather discursive level. We're looking at various documents and images, how these represent or obscure imagined pasts and presents and futures, how potential risks are identified, and these include, so we look at policy documents, media reports, mission statements of various organizations, websites, marketing campaigns, and so on. Subsequent stages in the research will involve further interviews with users as well as with designers, policymakers, and key influencers. But for today, I want to summarize some of the discursive work we've done. So here's an example of what we could call a socio-technical imaginary. And this comes from West Health, which is a fairly large commercial enterprise in the US. And it's organized around this idea of successful aging that links smart home technologies, wearable technologies, data transfer, and connective technologies. So you can see here across the images, I don't know if everyone can see that terribly well, but you've got everything from technologies of optimization in terms of Fitbits and personal health technologies, smart home technologies that include in-home sensors, robotic companions and that enhance your sense of self, and caregiver monitoring technologies so that they can enable this is the enablement of support teams. And I think you can see in this this grand imaginary organized around this concept of successful aging, a particular vision of how we might organize aging futures that's based on the idea of measurement, circulation, and the creation of possibilities. Here's another way of mapping this. This is AgeWell's mapping of the links between personal wearable technologies and devices, such as walking sensors, cell phones, what they call actigraphy devices, personal wearable devices, and PC-based cognitive testing devices, coaching, sensors throughout a smart home, and medication tracking. And all of these produce data. As I say, this is big data in the home that so we're measuring things, we're circulating it, and again, shaping possibilities. So the individual then is at the center of different types of digital connections. They're connected to their individual data, they're connected to others, so such as social media friends or caregivers who are monitoring their data. They're also connected to this idea of a collective older person that's being produced by data aggregates and algorithms. And then, of course, they're connected to the devices and objects through ambient sensing, through wearable technologies and smart home capacities. So this is a vast and complex set of connections. And I'm only going to focus on a very limited set of examples around digital technologies of health and fitness. Well, seniors, and as you'll see in a lot of this, seniors are this amorphous category that includes, everyone, sometimes 50 plus, sometimes 60 plus, sometimes, and we know that's a very really erroneous way to categorize this demographic. But they are currently underrepresented online, but are now probably one of the fastest growing groups of internet users. And specifically, searching for health information is one of the main reasons that they're finding seniors go online. So, of course, industry has found this. You'll see lots of headlines about what a gold mine this is for industry. They've seen massive potential in the development of technologies to support healthy aging, active aging, successful aging, air quotes. They also produce data that's going to influence public health, and it's intended to also support elder care, both at home and in care facilities. So we need, as I think about the way we're producing data around health and fitness technologies, we need to think about it on two levels. One is individual data that you might use to make decisions about your own daily life and your own choices you make. So I've only got 2,000 steps today, I'd better go for a walk. But the other is on the aggregation of data that is used to make decisions about population health. And both of those get implicated in this connection between measurement, circulation, and policies aimed at optimization. So both the individual and the collective older person start to figure as problematic in ways that need to be governed through lifestyle, through exercise, social engagement, brain health. We now see the idea of risk, and risk is something you can manage. This is replacing, fate. So midlife is increasingly becoming configured around preventative lifestyles. I was at a workshop on the idea of dementia prevention a few weeks ago, where one of the presenters was saying it's like science feels like they've cracked the code of lifestyle now, and all you need to do is exercise and eat right, and all is well. And this certainly gets reflected in the data-driven technologies that we're looking at. So what we're looking at now is trying to highlight certain questions that are being raised by this tracking of aging bodies in line with this promotion of successful, healthy lifestyles. So in particular, we're interested in how aging bodies become central to understanding the relationships between technology, health, and consumerism. And the specific devices for measuring and quantifying have varied. Think, for example, of low-tech things like bathroom scales, right? We've been using those for a long time to measure and quantify things. What's distinctive now are the way that devices are collecting and circulating that data. So it used to be when you stood on your bathroom scale, it was between you and the bathroom scale what the number was, and this is no longer the case. So we're looking at a large assemblage of instruments and knowledges and practices that support aging individuals in trying to align themselves with these objectives of healthy aging. So while older people have long been expected to engage in measuring and monitoring things like their weight or their blood pressure or their cholesterol levels, we're now seeing technologies that are connective, that are collecting that data, and they're pooling that data, producing visualizations, and increasingly providing opportunities for capitalizing and monetizing that data. We also feel that the technologies that are aimed at improvement and enhancement are also endowing aging bodies with this plasticity, or an assumed plasticity that you can intervene, you can manage, you can optimize. So it's really creating human capacities to try and use data to intervene and modify. So one example that might be familiar to many of you is the idea of wearable self-trackers, or Fitbits. So there's a very growing and lucrative industry for wearable tracking technologies. It's supported by public health initiatives that promote activity and promote the avoidance of inactivity. And these are two kind of separate things. So wearable self-trackers produce a range of data. The most basic of those is the number of steps, this output of steps. And the common goal of, I'll bet most of you could tell me what the common goal is. 10,000 steps. That's what comes out of the box with the Fitbit, right? No one seems to know where it comes from. Where 10,000 steps come from. I tried to trace it, and apparently it was a Japanese marketing campaign for Japanese businessmen some years ago. Anyway, so we have this common goal of 10,000 steps per day, and this is what gets tied to state-promoted fitness initiatives. But new benchmarks have emerged that are also being tracked, such as the amount of the number of inactive minutes that you have. So it's suggested that older adults should accumulate at least 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensive aerobic physical activity per week in bouts of 10 minutes or more. That comes from the Public Health Agency of Canada. So the biosensors in your tracker provide not just the number of steps you took, but measures of your active minutes. And so you could get your 10,000 steps, but you might not have gotten your 150 minutes of activity, right? So these become independent measures. Many now also track your heart rate. So in fact, probably most of the even entry-level fitness trackers now are collecting heart rate. And heart rate is seen to quantify both your effort, are you really walking, with vigor, or are you just strolling, but also your overall health. So resting heart rate is taken as a measure of overall health, or it's interpreted that way. So the data that's getting produced by these calculations, these devices, get linked to calculation of present risk, but more importantly, future health risk. So they're really digitizing risk factors in such a way and feeding it back to you so you can modify your actions as a way of mitigating your future risk. And I'll show you in a minute how heart rate gets used as a measure of your effectiveness. Well, fitness trackers in this sense take on a quite unique positioning in relation to aging populations. When fitness trackers are sold to younger people, they're sold as increasing self-knowledge, increasing the way you want to better yourself, improve yourself. As they're pitched to older people, it's entirely focused on health. It's not, here's a couple of statements from industry analysts who say, using a Fitbit or similar device makes monitoring one's health part of a lifestyle. When an elderly person uses a tracker, it's to predict possible changes in health, such as health decline with aging. And this is a little bit problematic. It shapes the digital fitness tracking as part of what we would think of as a healthy lifestyle. But lifestyle in age studies is a complicated concept. Lifestyle represents, to cite my colleague Stephen Katz, a complicated series of spaces where individual agency and social structure come together in ways that define aging today. So we want to think of self-tracking then as not just a lifestyle change that feeds into this algorithm of need more steps, better heart health, but in fact as an individual and a social practice that's shaped on new pressures for aging individuals to manage and optimize their bodies in particular ways, and particularly in such a way as to avoid dependency. And this becomes another one of those divisions about being able to stay independent. The outputs of those devices need to be interpreted and made meaningful to their users, and this implicates a whole web of expert and lay discourses and contexts and other technologies and public possibilities. So what makes the number of steps collected meaningful, right? How do you interpret that? Who tells you if it's enough or not enough, or what the effect is going to be? The other technology we've been looking at is brain games and memory protection apps, or things that try to introduce preventative measures for cognitive status. So cognitive health is now being added to other health statuses like fitness. And we get this increasing focus on brain care implicated with exercise and an increasing number of digital technologies to try and boost brain health. So daily brain exercises, things that we're told to keep our brain active every day. There are a number of programs you can get for your phone, a number of apps, you can track your progress. What they found mostly is that doing brain games makes you better at doing brain games. Yeah, it's not really okay. So, but it's tied in with this idea of cognitive politics, and again plays on this idea that we've got this plasticity, that if we just collect some measurement and we change behavior, we can increase this idea of plasticity. So we get these images as the brain as a muscle, and this permeates the neurocultural commercial field of cognitive advice and neurostimulants and protectors, and these brain boosting programs like Brain Age 2 and Happy Neuron and brain gyms and brain spas. So we get this kind of assumed loop. This is a hugely lucrative field, which again is being exploited, and it's expected to increase rapidly in the next few years. I don't want to give you the figures because they tend to be quite hyperbolic. 6 billion, I don't know where they pull those figures from. But as with the physical training and the measurement, brain training plays also on some similar ideas. To quote Brad Millington, it's based mainly on recent neuroscientific findings that the brain is less like a blank slate or a computer processing center and more like a muscle that can undergo atrophy or hypertrophy depending on its stimulation. So it's just like another muscle. Well, we suggest that fitness tracking and brain training and technologies like this are linked in 3 important ways to cultural projects of quantifying age and age-related function. So the first is the production of biodata. So again, let's recall this concept of the social quantification sector. The continuous stream of data produced by devices and apps goes somewhere, okay? Even though it may not be identifiable to you, it's going somewhere. And if you think for a moment about the proliferation of wearable tracking and biosensing technologies, technologies, we can see all those individual bodies as nodes in a big network, as visible nodes in this, Internet of Things. According to the data analytics firm Vivametrica, wearable activity monitors produce more biometric data than the combined public health surveys of every nation on the planet. And an entire industry has formed around capitalizing on the ability of those tracking devices to transform bodies into collections of data points. So that's the first way we think this is important. The second, as I mentioned, is while personal health technologies are increasingly called upon as solutions to challenges of aging, we think they're also contributing to ways of distinguishing and embodying aging. So much has been written about the increasing diversity of older adults and on the binary of third age, fourth age, and we worry that the production of these, the data produced by these technologies is going to continue to produce divisions between risk-averse, independent active, and those who are risk-prone, dependent and passive. Third, as activity is promoted, as this code of lifestyle is cracked, then it gets tied into new forms of governance. So to cite Emmanuel Toll, the everyday life of the aged body is colonized, known, and monitored by measurement, given the proverbial kick up the backside using digital devices. Here's an example that maybe will pull this together. As some of you may know, insurance companies are actively partnering with the makers of fitness devices to offer incentives for those who offer up their health data. And in fact, this fall, John Hancock, which is Manulife's US arm, announced that all its insurance will now be what it calls interactive. You give them your fitness data and they adjust your insurance rates in return. And this is their reward chart in Britain, and so you get, if you get 12,500 steps tracked in a day, you get 8 vitality points, or 5 for 10,000. And this you don't, have to fill out a form. It's just being automatically sent to your, and you get more points for what percentage of your heart rate you're exercising at. So again, it adds in that extra bit of data that you're sending there. So if you think about this through this process of measurement, circulation, possibility, and this is actually an example Dave Beer uses, your exercise activity is measured, it circulates through the insurance company's algorithms, and then it produces possibilities, rewards, or maybe reclassification as high risk. So fitness tracking is just one example of how aging bodies have been reconceptualized. In the 2 minutes I have left, I'm sure there's 2 minutes, 3. Okay, I just want to give you a quick sense of how the gerontological sector envisions our aging future. And a move from self-tracking as a responsible aging citizen, self-tracking and producing a healthy lifestyle, to being tracked by others. So great call. Best Buy has just bought this company, Great Call, which produces phones and call devices that are specifically designed for seniors and tracks their location, their medical conditions, medications, other personal information, and allows someone else to monitor it. This is the Remo, a bridge devising the measuring functions of the smartwatch and fitness tracker with the management and monitoring introduced by connectedness to both, your concierge or someone remote monitoring you, and into a whole range of personal and expert networks represented there by health data and analytics. This is the LifePod, which dispenses with this, the idea that it's self-tracking into a monitoring device. And I love the futures here. It says new features will be added to LifePod, continuously integrating data from IoT and wearable sensors and enabling many easy-to-use health-related applications and communications. So there's your future. And this one is Jerry Joy. Jerry Joy is aimed at both seniors at home and those in long-term care. And it monitors and interacts via a tablet-based avatar. And here you can see observation or measurement, reporting or circulation, and evaluation or creating possibilities. This is a little avatar puppy that you would interact with. It would, yeah, have you been propping up your legs when you sit down? You know, no, you get a, and what kind of worried me about this is there's several testimonies on their website which suggest that it can roll back cognitive decline. So here, you know, this quote says, "Peanut has rolled back my mom's Alzheimer's by probably at least a year." I mean, which is a really outrageous claim to be making in terms of plasticity. Winterlight is developing artificial intelligence-based ways to identify cognitive or functional decline through markers in speech. And if you want any more examples of this information, you can go to our website at www.digitalaging.info, where we have an archive that's been curated by one of our brilliant research assistants, Sharon Caldwell, that has a range of examples. Okay, so obviously I have only scratched the surface of some really big questions here. And we hope that we'll encourage other researchers to take up some of these questions. While we are critical, and sort of the first three questions that I outline here are ones that are very critical about thinking about what these technologies are doing and the potential for things to go wrong. But we also want to recognize that as they engage with these technologies, older people themselves are contributing to a reconstitution and recalibration of age and age-related characteristics, reshaping age, and it may in fact offer new reflexive possibilities for thinking through how we negotiate our experience and managing our aging futures. So thank you to thank you to those who've helped fund the research and facilitate our stuff, and particular thanks to my collaborator, Stephen Katz, who couldn't be here today, and the wonderful assistance we've had from three fantastic students who've helped collect things. So.